This is it. This is the fucking big one. There's no time to do anything else. This is the most important moment pretty much of everybody's lives, and it's probably one of the most important moments in all of humanity because of what's happening with AI. I saw the financial crisis coming. I'd written about it. I made money from it. My clients made money. Many of them were the famous investors from the film The Big Short, but a lot of people got hurt. I felt uncomfortable being at the centre of the financial system with all the knowledge, with all of the cool kids, the hedge fund managers and the banks, when I can see that the whole world around me was changing. It's basically down to the two big mega trends. One is technology. Tomorrow is more digital than today. But your house is not an asset. It will get you nowhere in life.
Are you afraid of death?
That's a question.
Hey, Raoul.
Hey, good to see you, Paul.
Welcome to ACCIÓN podcast. Thanks so much for having me here in the Caymans, in your house. This is an amazing opportunity, I think, for everyone from Latin America and my audience and people who are into crypto from a different space and a different region to get an idea of what you do, where you come from, and the human behind Raoul Pal in this, bigger than life, Twitter and social media persona and everything that you do, which is fascinating, and we'll get into that in a bit. So let's start a little with the basics, kind of what you do with Journeyman. For someone who's probably been living under a rock and is not into crypto, or it's new to the markets and don't know who you are maybe, can you just tell us a little brief story of what you do and what's been your story so far?
Yeah. My background was finance. 30 years of finance. I worked for firms like Goldman Sachs. I then ran a big hedge fund in macro investing. So macro is investing in all asset classes. Could be stocks, bonds, emerging markets, could be currencies, could be anything, commodities, but based around how economies move. So what we do is we project forwards and forecast economies and understand how that's going to move the stock market or whatever it is. That was my background. And I was doing that until about 2005. Then I moved to Spain, to the Mediterranean coast of Spain, where I started writing Global Macro Investor, my kind of premium research service. And the idea there was to use the accumulated knowledge that I'd had over 20 years at that point, 10, 15 years in the hedge fund industry, and selling research services to hedge funds to help them think through the world, how to make opportunities, that kind of thing. And I still write that to this day, 20 years later. So I've become a communicator. So not only as an analyst, also an investor, but also a communicator.
Right.
And I've been doing that also within Goldman Sachs and other places. I realized that I was a good communicator. Then everything changed in 2008. I saw the financial crisis coming. I'd written about it. I made money from it. My clients made money. Many of them were the famous investors from the film The Big Short. But a lot of people got hurt. And it wasn't that bad in Europe yet. Then 2012 came. In 2012, we had the European crisis,
right,
where almost all the governments went bankrupt and the banks were going under. And friends of my parents and friends of friends were having money taken from the banks as banks shut down. Friends who were in the real estate industry were out of business, and they were angry. And everybody was angry at this point. So Occupy Wall Street was the US anger from the young people saying, what is going on with the financial system? Why are we losing our jobs? Why are we losing our houses? Why are our parents going bankrupt? What is going on? And then in Europe, in Spain, we had the Indignados, the 4 million people, I think, who marched to the streets of Madrid from the provinces. Anger. And I realized that people didn't know what was going on. The financial system was in fact broken. There had been so much debt built up over the decades prior that it had made it very fragile. And nobody understood this because everyone thinks your money's safe in a bank.
Right.
A government is safe. Well, if you're from Latin America, you'll understand you don't think
you're never safe. Period.
You don't think those things in Latin America or South America
right,
or wherever. But at the core of the financial system, the US and Europe, that is the fundamental belief. And then that got shattered. So I thought, I need to do something about this. And I looked at two-pronged approach. One was, okay, can I find a bank that's safe? Because banks use something called fractional reserve banking, which means the piece of whatever you put in is relent multiple times.
They have, I think, 10 times more than to create of whatever they're lending, right?
Yeah, and sometimes in the financial system, a US government bond, which is deemed to be the safest thing in the world, had 30 different claims on it. So when you come and say, I want my money back, 30 people have a claim on it as well. It's quite screwed up, but it's how the banking system works.
Yeah.
It's called fractional reserve banking. So I went around the world trying to start the world's safest bank. And it was difficult. And I went to Singapore, Switzerland, the UK, and the US. And we almost bought a bank in Texas. And we had the chairman of the FDIC, the regulator of the banking system that protects depositors. We had a quality team of people. And we went to the Federal Reserve in Dallas and said, we'd like a banking license. And they said, tell us what you're doing. We explained we're going to have a non-fractional reserve bank. So every dollar goes in
the rules.
It'll just own a bond with the treasury. So there's nobody in the middle, nobody can go bust. And he said, it's a great idea and we're never going to give you a license.
Jesus.
I'm like, why? He's like, because you'll take all the deposits. If you have one bank that's safer than all the others, it takes all the deposits. So that kind of made me think, wow, okay,
This is rigged.
it's rigged against you, right?
Yeah.
And so I was writing about it in Global Macro Investor, and one of my clients wrote to me and said, Bitcoin. And this was 2012. And so I started digging into Bitcoin. By 2013, I wrote the first ever macro strategy piece to value Bitcoin. It was at $200. And I said, if I look at it versus gold, how much we know is above ground and how much we know is below ground, and look at that relationship, like with Bitcoin, what's mined and what's yet to be mined. It should be worth 700 ounces of gold. At the time, that would have been $1 million, and it was trading at 200. I'm like, maybe I'm wrong by 90%. It's worth $100,000. This is the best investment opportunity of all time. We'll talk a bit about why crypto matters in a bit. So that started me on the crypto journey. The other part of the journey is I wanted to help people. I felt uncomfortable being at the center of the financial system with all the knowledge, with all of the cool kids, the hedge fund managers and the banks, when I can see that the whole world around me was changing, that people wanted to take control of their finances. And so I thought the best thing I can do is democratize the knowledge that I have and that we have within the financial system. And so I reached out to some friends of mine, famous hedge fund managers, and said, would you publicly talk about what you're thinking and stuff like that? They've all got egos. They're like, yeah, of course. So I'm like, so I can get the world's most famous investors to talk about what they're thinking, what they're investing in. So this was 2014. Video had barely started. I think YouTube had been going for 2 years.
No,
So-
YouTube was like 2007, but it was mostly about pranks and other
and cat
stuff.
videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so it was still really, really nascent.
Yeah.
Netflix had only just started. So we decided video, which we knew nothing about. So we formed a company, 4 of us, in a small village in Spain. And we decided to build a video business, of which none of us had ever made a video, edited one, or anything. And that was the thesis, is we know fuck about fuck. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just going to do it because we knew it's probably the right medium to educate people. So that was the rise of Real Vision. But as part of that, Real Vision's journey has been to really explain why the system is broken and then how you can unfuck your future, how you can take advantage of the situation by investing to make your future safer, to realize that vision of your future self. So crypto was part of that, as have a whole bunch of other things. We've got the world's most famous investors, analysts, strategists together, democratized access, created a subscription business, and helped as many people as possible on that journey.
That's fascinating. It's such an arc. It's such a story, but something that gets my attention from there, and I want to kind of like go back to that in a little. Then we'll again move back to crypto and go on tangents and like this is not scripted, so we'll just go switching topics. But you said I'm kind of like a marketer by nature, and then I get this. I know that your dad was a marketer for Xerox.
Yeah.
Your mom was a Dutch au pair.
Yeah.
So she also had the traveling in her DNA. Your dad as well, because he was like traveling a lot. Like,
He came from India.
Right.
And then went back again overland from England to India, ended up in prison in Turkey and in Iran, and eventually he couldn't go through Pakistan to get back to India, and his dad had to send him a plane ticket from Iran to get back to India.
Jesus.
So travel's in my blood.
Exactly. So I was getting there. So you think that informs a little of you, this thirst you have for life, for moving, for exploring, for living life to its fullest potential. Do you think it comes from that, like, already roots in your DNA from your parents?
Yeah, I do. Because I think travel is the one form of education that changes your perspective on everything. You just understand people at a human level as opposed to what you're told to believe. You know? When I was told that Iran was the most evil place in the world, I went there. Loved it. Amazing people.
Make your own opinion and get to see what's about.
Yeah. You know, and I've spent time in the jungles of Papua New Guinea, through to the mountains of the Himalayas, through to the deserts of southern Africa. I mean, I've been everywhere. And you have a very different view of the world, but you realize that the world is a beautiful, incredible place.
You have had this theory, and I love it, and so many people on social media has reacted to that in a huge way. I've seen the responses. A lot of people identify with this. You mentioned that money is a scoring system, but at the end of the day, quality of life, experiences, that's the ultimate goal, the bucket of the quality of life. And if I'm not wrong, I think you said at some point the best investment of my life, the one I will go irresponsibly long until the day I die, is quality of life. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah,
one?
it's quality of life and experiences. Right, we have one go on this planet that we remember.
Right.
And therefore, you can solve for quality of life in a number of ways. People get so Instagrammed. Quality of life needs to be the 8-bedroom house in Palm Beach.
Right.
It's
The Amalfi Coast with the super fancy dish and all that stuff.
It's bullshit.
Yep.
You can have the same quality of life of living on a beach in beautiful weather in Nicaragua for a 20th of the cost. But basically, you've got the same things. You've got the salty, warm air.
Yeah.
You've got the jungle around you. You've got some wildlife.
Little crazy government, that's the only thing?
Yeah, but
yeah.
yes, I mean, there are trade-offs.
Right.
But it's not about how big it is or the prestige it gives you. It's the feeling it gives you. So the first thing that I remember, I was working in finance and having a mortgage and having an apartment in London, which was expensive.
That's
blah,
your
blah, blah.
GLG time?
That was GLG Goldman time. But when I was still at Goldman, my dad and I went out for dinner, and he was talking to me, and I said to him, at some point I'd love to buy a house in Spain, because I love Spain. I love the lifestyle, the quality of life. And my girlfriend from university's mum lived in Mallorca, so I'd spent time there. And I knew it's kind of half India, half Holland.
Right.
It's like a mix.
Yeah.
And it was like, I feel home here. And so he said, you know what, a friend of mine's selling a house. So I'm like, your dad says those things, like, yeah, whatever. And then he said, yeah, it's in this town called Gandia, never heard of it. Clearly wasn't a trendy area, it wasn't in Ibiza or something. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So then, this was back in late 90s, he faxes me a picture from a dinner of this house, because he'd gone to the friend's house who was selling it. And it was a 6-bedroom house on a hillside, overlooking orange groves, 10 minutes from the beach, 15 minutes from the beach. I'm like, okay. It's not the most beautiful house in the world, but it's pretty amazing. I'm like, well, yeah, but how much is it, Dad? He's like, well, let me find out. Came back, it was £150,000, so $200,000. 6-bedroom house. So I went the next week and bought it.
Right.
And because I was working in finance, I had enough cash to buy it. Now I'd won the game.
Or yeah.
I'd won a house. I'd now own a house in a beautiful climate, in a safe, lovely country, spectacular views, big enough to have my friends at, low cost of living. And so if anything went wrong in my career, I could just go there. I could work in a bar and still, that is so liberating.
Yeah.
I de-risked my entire life in one go. And that's what I realized is these lifestyle ratchets, where they can't take it away, are super, super good.
That's also, I think, the moment that you, at some point, I think we had this conversation and you said, I was in Spain, I was walking on the beach, and I saw this giant table of like 20, 25 people with different generations just like eating, laughing, sharing a bottle of wine, and having a good time in the middle of nowhere. And that's when it hit you and we're like, I want that.
That's right.
So you blended that, like, I'll win the game. I get a house already, cheaper, with all the perks of this quality of life, plus that,
Yeah,
right?
because I can have a paella on a Sunday in the orange groves with friends, cost basically nothing. That's like, wow. But I then pursued that dream, and I eventually moved to Spain in a beautiful house in the middle of a national park, close to the beach. And it wasn't the dream that I thought it was.
Oh, interesting.
Part of it was to have the mountains. I had a mountain in my back garden, the nature, being near the beach, the quality of life of the chiringuitos, the little Spanish beach bars and all of that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Problem was, in a small beach town in Spain, there's no intellectual capital. Everybody works in the tourism industry or builds houses. That's it. And so there's me living in the finance world,
Right.
digitally. I have nobody to talk to about any of it. So when the financial crisis was coming, I was trying to tell my friends. I remember sitting down. There was 12 of us having a boys' lunch, a boozy lunch on a Friday. And I'm like, guys, please be careful. Please. They didn't understand what I was talking about. They wouldn't listen to me. And, 50% of that table of people went bankrupt.
Oh.
And there was nobody to talk. So it becomes very lonely when you see the bigger world. And they don't.
So in a way, you also needed that intellectual stimulation. You were not hitting that by being there.
That's right.
And that's when Cayman came, or?
That's right. And Cayman came by accident because I had two dreams in my life. Mediterranean beach, Mediterranean living, plus a tropical beach. Because I'd been around the world diving. It was one of my reasons to travel to extreme places was to go diving. And I love tropical beaches. So I had been on a journey to look for a tropical beach to build a house, one of those things that you want in your life that drive you forwards, whether I was going to get there or not. But anyway, I was shark diving in the Galapagos.
Hey, shout out Ecuador.
Yeah. And I was with a bunch of people who were from the Cayman Islands. And they were like, well, why don't you look at the Grand Cayman? I'm like, no. It's where we are today. It's suburban. It's not nature. Well, it is nature. I mean, you can see here, but it's not nature. I'm like, I want the remote tropical beach where it's just me and nature. And they're like, well, there's this weird place called Little Cayman. You might like that. I'm like, what do you mean? How weird? They're like 140 people weird. I'm like, that sounds perfect.
That's your kind of weird.
So I went there the following year and bought a piece of land, built a house, and then ended up moving here because I realized that I would get many of the things of the quality of life of Spain. Yes, it's more expensive. Yes, the culture's not the same and not as deep. But I could live a very nice life in great climate. But I was surrounded by entrepreneurs, interesting people. If you think the default worker in Javier, in the town I was in Spain, was really, as I said, tourism, real estate, construction. The average person here, professional, is a lawyer or an accountant, right? So they're just very different. They're also mainly in financial services, so they understand a lot of that. But then I realized it was attracting tech entrepreneurs, crypto entrepreneurs. And so I'm like, okay, this has got a lot of what I want. Also, the economic center of gravity had left Europe. It had left the UK and had massively shifted to the US. It wasn't even really in China or Singapore, which was the early 2000s. So suddenly, here I am in the time zone where I'm an hour from Miami, 3 hours from New York, direct flights to Houston, Dallas, Toronto, wherever you wanted to go, and a direct flight to London. Around entrepreneurs, smart people, in a safe, pleasant environment, and you get access to the energy of the United States. And that was game-changing for me. That kind of changed my life.
So, Raoul, for people who are watching this and listening, they might be like, okay, that sounds amazing. That sounds like such the life, but I'm fucked. As you said, the system is rigged. I'm pissed. My mortgage is this, my insurance, the maintenance costs, or whatever it is. And they might be like, okay, but how do I do it? Because maybe you were at the right time, in the right market, at the right moment back in the day, when your salary, you say, was like probably 3 times or something. So for you buying the house, the $200,000 was boom, there it is. Done. I won the game. But let's bring that to 2024. Let's pretend that aliens land in your backyard right now. And they tell you, Raoul, explain to me
You
what's
calling,
going on.
calling Lauren an alien?
By the way, thank you, Lauren, for helping us. I appreciate it. Shout out to Lauren Mark, who's the producer of this podcast today. Let's say aliens appear right now and say, Raoul, explain to me what's going on with the financial system in 30 seconds right now. What's happening?
It's the same story. Too much debt, and everyone has to serve, and not enough economic activity to pay for the debt. So if you go back, you've got a big credit card bill. If your wages aren't going up, but your credit card bill keeps going up by 20% a year by interest, before you know it, your credit card bill just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can't pay it back. Now, governments are lucky because what they've got is the ability to print money.
Right.
We don't get that. But it's the equivalent of getting another credit card to pay your credit card.
Yeah.
That's what's going on as the population of most of the Western world gets older. Old people, if you think of your parents or your grandparents, they spend less money and they don't do productive work because they've retired. So we're fighting this mega trend of the baby boomers from World War II. The kids who got born after World War II are now in their 70s. And that was the largest cohort of people in all history. And so what we've got is slow growth, but massive debt. So what is happening is governments are having to print more money. And again, anybody from South America understands this. They print more money to pay the debt. But your wages don't go up. They only go up a bit. But what happens is things like houses, scarce assets, houses, gold, or even your ability to buy US stocks, they just keep going up. So you're getting poorer. Your wages buy less. I'm not talking about buying bread and cheese. I'm talking about buying assets. What is an asset? An asset is future deferred consumption. You buy an asset like stocks. Let's say you buy an ETF in the S&P 500. Why do you buy that? Because in the future, you want to sell it to be able to spend the money.
For a profit, yeah.
Or pass it on to your kids, whatever it is, but it's to be spent. And it's supposed to have a rate of return above inflation because you need to be compensated for locking your money up for 20 years, or whatever the period of time is. But what we're finding is that those things, so that future opportunity for yourself, is becoming more unaffordable. It took me 3 times income to buy my first house, and now for the average person it's 10 times income. Oof. So you can buy less of a house. You can buy a third of a house versus what I could buy with the same economic circumstances. You know, when I was 28 years old, most people can't do it now. So this is the problem that is happening in the world. And this is not going away. And so governments are printing money to keep servicing this debt, which is, again, for anybody here who's from Argentina, Venezuela, anywhere, even Ecuador, everybody's done it. And then eventually the system collapses. The system doesn't collapse this time around because it's the US doing it, and the Europeans, and the Chinese. But it's really the US system of fiat money. Don't forget, the dollar is the world's reserve currency. Again, anybody from Latin America knows, what do they want? Dollars. They don't really give a shit about anything else. They want dollars. And dollars are 87% of world trade. It makes the world go round. The world is 400% of GDP in debt, of which 200% of that is dollars. Dollars, 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 dollars. And the US controls it all. It's called the world's reserve currency.
Right.
So when they debase currency, it's very difficult for them to lose control unless the entire world loses faith in the dollars. But then where do they go? There's no other currency. What are you going to do? Buy the euro? No, it's equally shit. Arguably worse. So they have this privilege of having the world's reserve currency. And then they debase it, and scarce assets across the world go up. So it's making everybody poorer. Everyone's in this same boat. It's like a slow motion version of what happened in, let's say, Venezuela. But it's just slow. It's 8% a year. So you don't see it. It's not like 1,000,000% hyperinflation.
Right.
8% a year, but you're getting poorer by 8%. Then there's inflation on top. Call that 3%. So 11% a year, your wages are getting poorer.
Yeah, and to bring that to the layman example, if you have $100 in your account, next year will be 89 of purchasing power for that amount.
Yeah.
So by doing nothing, you're getting just poorer. And so you need to find a vehicle that surpasses that 11%. And then we get into this conversation of
we were told as kids would save money.
Right.
Well, so you need to save 11% of your income every year to just stand still. Right, so that doesn't work. And then you can say, okay, if you're in the US or the UK or something, they'll say, well, invest in your pension and buy the S&P 500, buy stocks. Great, sounds good, because stocks go up by about 11% a year, 12% a year.
On average, because they're in the recessions and this and that, but usually the average is that.
Yeah, average is around that over the last 20 years. Great. So that doesn't get you ahead of the 11% of debasement, 8% debasement, 3% inflation. So you're going nowhere. You're locking up money to go nowhere. Okay, it's better than nothing. Gold is the same. Most real estate is the same. So you're like, oh, okay, how the hell do I get out of this trap? Now, you have two answers. One is to invest in yourself and build a business. It's hard, but that's what you have to do. You have to generate cash flow to invest. If not, you can't invest.
Right.
So you need to generate cash flow. So you invest in yourself, build a business, do whatever you can, hustle, work 3 jobs. That's what everybody's doing. But then the real magic is, what do you invest in? And it's basically down to the 2 big mega trends. There's 2 trends that are so obvious. One is technology. Tomorrow is more digital than today.
Yes or no, and then it's a basic yes. It's a no-brainer.
And it'll go up and down at various points, but over time, there's nothing to stop the digitization of the world. And we're seeing AI as one of those mega trends that goes on top of the internet, etc. The other one, which is actually technology, that's also built on top of the internet, is crypto. But crypto is like having a share of the internet yourself. So imagine how empowering that would have been. Imagine if every person who used Facebook was given a share in Facebook. Right?
Retired.
We'd all be super rich.
Yep.
That's what crypto is. And so you can invest in this, and it goes up at about 100 to 150 to 200% a year, depending what asset, including 3 80% drawdowns. Okay, now you can unfuck your future pretty quickly, because if you've got $1,000, but it goes up 100% a year, it just compounds and compounds and compounds. And now you've got the secret. It's the big secret. It's the big opportunity. It's, in fact, the biggest opportunity of all time.
But then we get into this, and I'm with you. But I'm just trying to be right now in the shoes of the average person who's not on crypto yet. And they hear crypto, and they associate with Ponzi scheme. It's a fraud. It's going to zero. It's backed by nothing. Then 22 happens. There are black swans. There's FTX or whatever happens to happen. And they're afraid. How can we in this space be better to onboard more people and let them understand the big picture you're trying to do right now?
So when you were in a frontier, go back to the United States in the 1800s, there were cowboys.
Yeah.
There were bank robbers. There was all sorts of crazy people. Everybody was fighting over the land. The Mexicans, the Spanish, the English, the French.
Then the gold rush happened and it was nuts.
Right?
Yeah.
What you have is a lawless society that's learning to organize. It ends up becoming the United States of America. So when there's massive opportunities, it brings all sorts of players.
Right.
Like the internet did. From the Nigerian prince scam to Google. They all exist. And over time, the authentic businesses build scale and people get to understand them. But in the early stage, you don't really know. So it's a feature of an early stage market, of a frontier. So what you're saying is, okay, well, we do have easy ways here. Is Bitcoin. You don't rely on anybody. It's this asset that's global, that's homogenous, that's available to everybody, that you can buy from your mobile phone, that cannot be destroyed, cannot be intervened by anybody. It's yours. Okay, well, that's an easy bet. I'm not now relying on a scam or anything else. There's no Ponzi. It just is. And then we look at Ethereum. Well, Ethereum's like this supercomputer of this new internet that allows you to have contracts online. Smart contracts. That's what makes Ethereum. So then you can do all sorts of clever stuff, whether it's from tickets to agreements to whatever. Human society is organized by contracts. So then what's the probability of scammed at the token level? 0. These are huge, distributed, multi-million people networks.
Speaking of Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Yeah. And Solana and many of the big ones.
By market cap, the top ones, kind of like the same.
Where people lose their minds is they want to get rich quick.
Chasing the next meme coin, the next big thing.
Well, because people suddenly start to say, oh my God, I don't need to be trapped in the world of 10% a year in the stock market.
Right.
I've now been given this 100% a year, and then you become greedy. All you see is, I could make 1,000% or 10,000%. And then you do stupid shit. And that's when you get scammed. Because now you're exposing yourself away from the simple bets of investing in the technology layer to now you're investing in the applications layer. And that's when businesses are starting, who's building what. You know, it's a meme coin, it's a DeFi protocol, it's all of these things.
ICOs back in 2017,
and
2018.
You've got to ask yourself, are you qualified to be a venture capital investor, early stage? Are you doing the due diligence?
Taking the risk as well.
Taking the risk. Yeah. Right. They all are a power law. And so what that means is most of their bets go to somewhere near zero. Or let's say 20% go to zero, 50% don't do anything, and 10% make all the money. Now, are you qualified to do that? No, then don't do it. You don't have to do that bet when the assets are growing at 150% a year at the base asset, Bitcoin or Ethereum. You don't need to buy NFTs. You don't need to buy meme coins. You don't need to do any of these things. That's the really hard thing is the system sucks you into greed if you're not careful, and it's unnecessary.
The other interesting part now for everyone watching and listening is that now, the way I see it, as the average person in crypto, is that before it was always this fear of it could be taken away, it's backed by nothing, and etc. Since January of this year, of 2024, that we're about to end, it became finally, with the ETF approval of Bitcoin, pretty much legal in the US. Now we have a government like Trump that is going to be more pro-crypto, pro-innovation, pro-technology, and it's Elon on top of that. But you get these predictions by Bitwise and these giant institutions now giving really crazy predictions of where it's going to be. So my point that I'm trying to make here is like now we're having also the institutional big money, the big players putting their chips into crypto.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You see, everybody looks at it through their lens. And the lens may be you're from Venezuela, so you think you can have it expropriated. Or a gold investor in the US, well, they took gold. They didn't do it in Europe. But different people use their different lens. But we don't realize, and so you're worried about regulation.
Right.
It's a global asset. The Chinese have banned it.
And
the Indians, nothing happens.
Right. A little dip here and there.
Why? Because this is a network of millions of individuals. This is not driven by the institutions. It doesn't matter whether they come or not. People want to be validated. It's a ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
Oh, BlackRock think it's good, so therefore I'm not stupid. It's like, you're not stupid because literally hundreds of millions of people are using this,
right,
making money from it, building on top of it, and creating a new future. So therefore you can't be stupid. You do not need some bloke on television telling you that it's valid. So what we've done for the first time in history, if we go back to how I started this journey, those of us at the center would get the opportunities. And then you would charge layers of fees until it comes down to the individual. Well, they didn't even see them. They don't get to invest in Facebook when it launches. You know,
or Uber or Airbnb or whatever.
Anything, right? We don't get any of that stuff. It eventually goes into the public stock market and at several $1 billion. Yes, it went up a lot after that, but somebody's made 1,000,000% returns before that. Right? This is the complete inverse. There are no gatekeepers. Retailer first. They front run all of the institutions. They get all the opportunity, all of the upside. And the institutions come later and force the prices up, and we all get hilariously rich. Genius. It's a complete inversion of how the financial system works. So it doesn't really matter. I know people want the validation. Regulation helps because it stops governments shutting down your business in a different country. So yes, it helps, but don't forget, it's currently a $3 trillion asset. I think it goes to 100 trillion. The only way it gets there is to have more larger and larger pools of capital coming into the space. But if you think of it in those terms, it's still only 3% of the journey to where it's going to in the next 10 years.
Jesus.
Yeah, so it's
your thesis of 100 trillion for the asset class?
Therefore, it goes up 30x from here. I mean, again, people don't realize that. Am I too late? Bitcoin's at $100,000. I'm like, it's 3%. And therefore it should go up 33x from here. Okay, find me anything else. Assume that I'm wrong by 50%. It goes up 15x from here. Find me another investment anywhere in the world that will unfuck your future like this. It doesn't exist. Certainly not one you've got access to.
Or that's legal. The other one would be drugs or whatever. That's a completely different conversation.
Yes, but that has a massive risk profile of loss of life.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand. Like, people in economic hard times choose extreme situations. Now, given the choice, let's say you are on a border town in Mexico.
Right.
Right, and you can either work for the cartel and get a decent living, but you've got risk of death. You can probably make higher percentage, you will make higher percentage returns in crypto and not have to have risk of death. So really, it kind of should force a lot of people out of other industries. More illegal industries where people need to make money, because the reality is people in the drug business aren't bad people necessarily. The system is bad of what they're doing, but really they're just individuals trying to unfuck their future. If you're in the cocoa farms in Peru, you're not thinking that your farming is killing kids in nightclubs in Chicago. You're like, I need to make a living and pay for my kids. I don't want my kids to die off, So the incentivization structure is very different. But here we've got something that can get you out of that. It's fascinating.
The life raft.
And I see it here. The guy who cuts my hair is from the Philippines, and all the guys in the barbershop are all Filipinos. And they're all crazy crypto dudes. I'm like, why? What got you into this? And Asians like gambling. Okay, I get that. But he's like, simple is we send money home to our parents or to our families, remittance payments.
Yeah.
And we just learned that crypto was the easiest rail, so we all opened a Binance account.
Yeah, P2P, and that's it.
And then once I've got a Binance account, I'm like, what's this? Oh, this is going up. And then they're in. Right. And so these are pretty simple folk from the Philippines. I mean, my barber had here in the Cayman Islands, if you haven't got a permanent residency, every 7 or 9 years, you have to leave for a year and come back and reapply for your permit. And he'd been off for a year. And I just saw him last week. I'm like, Jules, what have you been up to? Were you working in the Philippines? He's like, no. I said, why not? He goes, Solana. He's like, I didn't need to work. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He goes, I made 10x in Solana. I spent a bit of that. Didn't work. So I spent a year with my family doing some good stuff, traded a bit of crypto. I'm like, okay. That's the empowerment.
That's what you call the lifestyle chips.
This is a barber from the Philippines that's working in the Cayman Islands. And he can not work for a year because of his investments. That's La La Land. Go to a barber in New York City and say, hey, you're not going to work for a year. Can you survive? No. Zero
Not even for a week.
Yeah, zero chance.
Jesus. You mentioned a keyword here into this whole thing. By saving or by anything, you mentioned asset, right? That would be the logic, what it demands. You put your money into assets. That's how you get out of the rat race. That's at least the idea we got by the system. But then...
Because you can... So just to clarify that.
Yeah.
You can earn income.
Right.
The game is to try and get some excess income. Mm-hmm. But if you don't invest, then you're always having to work for that excess income.
Yeah.
And you're not compounding the ability to get somewhere different in life that you want to.
And one of those asset classes that's been the ultimate aspirational goal for most of people is real estate. My house, the peace of mind. You have no idea. I love to live in the comment section of stuff, and this is a fascinating one because 90% of people say, no, my mortgage is cheaper than rent. The peace of mind that I get by having my own place that is mine is priceless. Then my head is like, okay, technically it's not yours. You stop paying property tax. The government will take that property from you. There's property tax, there's maintenance costs, there's opportunity costs that you could have put on Bitcoin, let's say. You're missing those gains. So there's a lot of things that people are phantom things that they don't see, and they're missing on the boat. How can you elaborate on that? Because I remember when you went on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, you went bananas when you said your house is not an asset anymore.
It's not an asset. Find me anybody who sold their house to take the money out. You don't, you live in it. You only would sell it under the worst duress, the worst situation. Like I was speaking to a friend of mine who fled Venezuela. They sold all their assets via sell prices. But otherwise, look at your parents. They still own their house. So what the fuck was that money for? What? So they have a roof over their heads? Well, you can rent and do that because, as you rightly said, if you don't pay, you go through tough times, you lose your job, or your business falls apart, and you can't pay your rent. You don't own the house. It's gone. Goodbye. So what's the difference to renting? If you're not actually getting an asset. Now, it's different if you're buying other houses as assets to build a portfolio.
A multi-family complex and renting.
Whatever. And I still don't even like that business. But let's assume you'd want to do it. Fine. But your house is not an asset. It will get you nowhere in life.
You mean the average single-family home?
Yeah, your apartment or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It is not an asset. Now, it becomes an asset in lifestyle terms when you don't have a mortgage on it. Because now it can't be taken away. Yes, the government can theoretically, but it comes much harder.
Right.
So therefore, that is the game, which is the lifestyle chips. That's lifestyle ratchet. That is not an investment. So the game should be, how do I make enough money that I can buy that apartment in cash? That is very different, because the apartment is not the asset. The lifestyle is the asset.
Funny, here I see you have a point in common with Dave Ramsey. Pay cash for your property, for example.
Yeah, but most people don't have the opportunity. But I'm giving you the opportunity. I'm telling you what it is. I'm telling you how to do it. And most people still don't take it because they've been so poisoned by this idea that the house is everything. Now, if you go to Germany, most people don't own houses. They rent. Same in France.
Very pragmatical people.
Yeah, but also because that they don't have a giant financial system. And it's a story told, a mimetic, which is you must get a mortgage as soon as possible in the house. Why? Because you're financialized. So here's a story about this. Back in the early 80s, the UK had been a more socialist, more on the left than the right, as countries go from one to the other. And Margaret Thatcher came into power. Now, after World War II, we had a huge issue. We had asked all our men to fight and women to go through the hardship of war. 20% of the entire population of Europe was killed. Many people came back from war injured. They had nowhere to live. They had to rebuild their lives. And we started the National Health Service. So did several European countries. That's why the Europeans have free healthcare and the US don't. It's because we owed it to all of these people who came back from war injured. There was no way they could afford it, so the government had to. Okay, so people don't really understand the impact of World War I and II. They were so big. The other thing is that there were houses had been destroyed, people had to rebuild lives, and there was this young boom of baby boomers. And people couldn't afford to buy the houses. So the government built houses. They were called council houses. And you can get them for free. Or very small rent. You just had to prove that you didn't have a larger income, etc. And much like healthcare, you had free housing. Revolutionary idea. What Margaret Thatcher did was realise those people, because they don't have a stake in the economic system, voted left. Give them the house and give them some debt, they vote right. So what she did was
populism.
Yes, and what she actually did was gave a friend of mine, we had a council estate nearby me, and my closest, oldest friend grew up on the council estate. Their parents got to buy it for virtually nothing. Huge discount to its actual value. So it like your airdropped a house.
Jesus.
And you buy it for 20 grand and it's worth 120 grand. Right? So suddenly you buy the house. How do you buy the house? With a mortgage. Now you're financialized. These people went from creditors, because they used to have their savings, to debtors. And now you're in the financial system and you're in the banking system and you're the self-perpetuating thing. Buy a house, get more debt.
Right.
Fund the banking system. The banking system funds the government. It's all part of this kind of industrial finance complex. And the housing story is one of the stories told to you, much like the S&P 500 pension story is one of these stories told to you that don't actually solve the problems anymore. They used to many years ago. And that's why I urge people to think differently and opt out of that system. I'm not saying a house is a bad thing, but don't think a house is an asset, because you will never sell it.
We go back to this. So I think the most important concept here is debt. And you mentioned World War II and World War I. And that one is key because with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and after that World War I, you see what you've talked about this before, the Treaty of Versailles. And pretty much in today's money is like, what, $8 trillion of debt? So pretty much so people can get the big picture, we're speaking about that Europe got fucked from the 1920.
Not just Europe. It was one country.
Germany.
So what happened was after World War I, which was the last kind of gentlemanly war, we did the unthinkable, which had never been done before, which is we forced the country who went to war to pay reparations to everybody else. And we forced such a large debt. Now, World War I was horrific. It was the largest loss of life the world had ever seen. It was awful. But they forced reparations on the Germans. The Germans couldn't afford it. They didn't have enough income because they'd been crushed by World War I too. And so what happened? Hyperinflation. What happens in hyperinflation? Populism. What happens in populism? Militarism. Rise of Adolf Hitler. Then Europe goes to war all over again because the Germans are pissed that they've lost everything. And was it their fault? Was it not their fault? Yeah, wars, of course, are the madness of people. But also, they were forced into a terrible situation. This is no justification for the Nazi Germany or anything else, but just saying what changes a population to do ridiculous things is when they become desperate. And then led by an insane leader, they can do truly terrible things. So that was the start of everything. That's why we went to war. After that, we killed each other to such a disgusting degree. People were so relieved when war finished, they all had kids. They're like, it's over. They'd seen 2 world wars, that generation, 2 world wars. So they had kids. The Americans had come and become the peacekeeper of the world. We're safe. We can have a family. And we had the largest population boom in all recorded history. Now, that seemed fine. Population growth equals economic growth. The economy starts taking off once these kids get a little older and they get into the workforce. Problem is you put too many people in the workforce earning their first paycheck at the same time, buying their first table, chair, house, car. Well, that's an unprecedented amount of instant demand, which caused unprecedented inflation. Obvious. The other problem is you put these in the US alone, there's 79 million baby boomers. You put them all into the workforce at the same time. Guess what? Wages don't go up. Too many workers. So they're all competing with each other. And then you get to the 90s, and we've got the WTO agreement and the NAFTA agreement. So now you're adding foreign workers into the equation. So you're competing with foreign workers, and you're competing with all of your other baby boomers around you. Oh, and then we throw in the technological revolution of the computer.
And the dot-com bubble and then the 2008 crisis.
And so the baby boomers, people talk and say, well, these are the richest generation of people ever. Yeah. Utter bullshit. The rich baby boomers are the richest people who ever lived. The median baby boomer in the United States has $150,000 in their pension.
Jesus.
That's basically going to see them, let's assume they spend 50 grand a year. That's 3 years. How are they ever going to survive? Which is what's keeping them having to work in their 70s in Walmart. It's horrific. And their kids, the millennials, well, there was 86 million of them. It wasn't as large a percentage as the baby boomers were, but 86 million millennials, and guess what? Everyone's working 3 jobs. Why? Too many millennials. Look at what happened to university degrees. They were told this story, get a university degree. It's the most valuable thing you can do. You'll earn more money. All the millennials, being quite a compliant cohort, all went and got a university degree. Right. What happens? You devalued them. You debased university degrees to worthless pieces of paper. So then they all had to go and do master's degrees. And they were still worthless.
And behind those degrees, there's again the same word, debt.
Yeah, so they forced you into doing it, telling you this is the only way to unfuck your future whilst fucking you with debt.
Right.
So the average master's degree student leaves with $120,000 in debt at the age of 24 years old, is working now 3 jobs, can't afford to move out of their parents, can't afford to get married, can't afford to buy a house. Okay, so the next 10 years of their lives is paying off the $120,000. They can't make investments. Really? Is this what we're going to do to people? That's what we've done. And this is why people are opting out. And this is why people are angry, is we are not solving this. We're making it worse. And we make it worse because we keep financializing everybody. And here we've got this asset, again, that's outside of this financial system. It's a parallel one that's being bootstrapped from the ground up by the people for the people. And they will take it.
Raoul, why all of this? I could see so many people thinking, well, this guy clearly did well. Why bother putting himself into places where sometimes people are nasty online or they are, disgusting and send bad vibes? What's the legacy that you want to leave behind? Like once Raoul Pal living in this carcass of your body, this avatar that you got in this life will die. And
I've been blessed with something, and that's somewhat the ability to see the future. And I can also see around me and recognize that people are fucking angry. And I can see why. I'm one of the very few people who put together all these component parts. Almost nobody's put together that it's World War II that caused it.
Right.
Or World War I, actually, and it's the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the end of the British Empire.
It makes so much sense.
It's all the same thing. And I figured out how the economic machine works and what's driving it and the debt thing. So if I can help people get off this journey and onto a new journey, then we can reset all over again. And if I can do that and still make money out of it myself, I can walk away with a sense of pride. I've unfucked my own future, and I've taken millions of people along with me. Now, I won't be perfect. I will get many things wrong. People will hate me for periods of time, and that's painful. But I don't know any way around it. And I'm pretty damn sure I'm right. And I've been right since 2013. Don't forget, that was $200 back then when I said it was the greatest trade of all time. I didn't hold on to it all the time. I've owned it for most of it, but I still fucked it up myself. But
you missed that 10x, right?
Yeah. No. Well, let me explain. I bought it at 200, sold it at 2,000. Then it went up to 20,000. Fine. It then fell, and I did the right thing. I was buying it in a bear market, and it was down 50%. But I bought it back at 6,500. And so, if I'd just held my 200, I would have made a lot more money. But anyway, so what's so amazing about this is basically I can forget all of the description of the space. This will make a higher return than building any business you will ever build. These fancy SaaS businesses, they grow at like 50% a year. That's an amazing business. This thing grows at 150% a year. So it almost makes doing anything else irrelevant. You're almost better to just sell your house and sell your assets, fuck off to a beach shack in El Salvador, stick it in Bitcoin, come back in 10 years' time, and your life will have been changed forever. And that sounds stupid, but that's what it is.
Are you afraid of death?
That's a question. Yes and no.
Why?
Because I haven't finished the journey. I've finished many chapters, but I haven't finished the book. It would only be that. It'd be like, really, for fuck's sake? I haven't finished this yet.
What do you think is the worst advice that someone has ever given you?
I don't know.
No idea.
No, because I tend to get through life, you have to forget all of the negative things. Because if not, they sit inside you. I could have, they shouldn't have, I shouldn't have. Why did it happen to me? All of that stuff, you have to leave all of that stuff behind. And so I don't think in those terms.
Is there still a piece of advice from a mentor that you had in your life that you apply up to this day?
No, you piece it together from everybody and everything, and seeing life lived in different countries and different places, and and at different points, different things become motivating to you, or different things make you rebel against them. What might have been my motivation when I was a kid, which was like an English country house with a gravel driveway and a Jaguar, is now makes my skin crawl. I could never want to do that ever again. I want different things. So, but that was my motivation of getting through university. I want to be that guy.
You were a kid in the 80s, right? In the UK.
Yeah. And that was the thing. I wanted the big house and the English country house and the English car and, all of that. And now I'm like, this is the worst thing in the world. I could never want that. Different things motivate you at different times. So everything shifts around. But the one piece of advice that was given to me, which is a bigger story than it sounds, which was somebody said to me back when I finished university, and they said, hey, what do you want to do? It was one of Dad's friends. What do you want to do now you graduated? And I graduated in a recession, so I was not going to get a job quickly, but okay. I said, I don't know, it's between marketing, because Dad was in marketing and I kind of understood it, or finance, because that was all the cool kids. And he said, it's pretty simple, really. He said, you can go and work for Mars, one of the great consumer marketing companies of all time, and you can get free Mars bars. Or you can go and work for a bank and get free money. Oof. So it's like, you can apply that to anything. You can be an investor and you can make 8% a year because you own the S&P 500. Mm-hmm. Or you can be an investor in cryptocurrencies and make 150% a year. You can go and work in finance industry now. Let's say you want to work for a hedge fund because that was glamorous. And the hedge fund industry is shrinking. And the returns have gone down from when I first started. A great macro hedge fund would try and make 30% a year returns. They now are forced by their investor base to make 6% returns. So you don't make any money, but it's still deemed to be glamorous. There's still some shine on it.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to go and be an investor, go and do it in crypto, where the returns are miles higher, and you're going to get paid, and you're going to get rich. Look for the secular trend. And it's not always the technology trend. It doesn't have to be technology or crypto. It can be the complete opposite too. I talked about this in the Stephen Bartlett podcast, is as we get more digital, most of us crave authenticity and humanness. Mm-hmm. So let's say, again, you are in Ecuador and you're thinking, how the fuck do I get out of this? Start a high-end guiding company in the Amazon and charge rich people from Silicon Valley 5 times the going rate for a luxury experience. You will get rich. Because it's a scarce thing, that humanness, that nature. You find a cohort of people that will pay for the right services. Deal with them. So there's many ways of skinning this, but it's looking at the megatrends. Nature will be a megatrend as well as technology at the same time.
Speaking of the audience that are watching this and they watch the podcast, in terms of advice, you already said someone from a mentor that you had or a friend of your dad back in the day. Now from you, this journey that you had in your life, if you could sit down with the Raoul in his 20s, in his 30s, and in his 40s, what's one piece of advice for every decade, for 20s, 30s, and 40s?
I wouldn't have done anything different. Literally, I would never have done anything different.
But what could you tell them, or Raoul, or people in those cohorts, in terms of like, what's the one thing that you should focus in your 20s, in your 30s, and in your 40s?
Your 20s, you don't know anything, you think you know everything.
Right. I think we still believe that in whatever age we have.
And so, yeah, okay. But
but yeah, 20 is more.
Your 20s is identify the trend and throw everything into it.
Okay, go all in into something.
Also, start building a network. You are going to be defined by the people around you.
Yeah.
The opportunities that come are from the people around you.
Yeah, you're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself most with.
Nobody gets the dream job by applying to a job in the paper. Mm. You're asked because you've met somebody who knows that you're good at what you do. Network. Mm-hmm. And that's not to be the dick who just tries to network everyone. Let me have a coffee and hit them up on LinkedIn. Just be useful, be around people, be a good guy or girl.
Add value.
Yeah, add value. In your 30s is the time to cement all of that and start thinking about, okay, what's the first part of lifestyle I want to take? But you're still going to have to work really hard. And then by the time, and the 30s is most people go through the complications of marriage, kids, those choices, and they become slightly obsessed by that whole thing. But that's the time you should now have decided what risks you're going to take with your future, and you should be taking them because you've now gained knowledge and experience. You might get one wrong, but generally you should not be now making bets that you're going to get too many things wrong. Your 20s is for getting things wrong because you can blow up and start again. In your 30s, you don't really want to blow up and start again. Most people will take one big bet then, and you should have made a good enough defined decision as, is this the right choice for me? Whatever industry you choose, whatever job it is or investment it is. In your 40s, it's all about compounding. Compounding lifestyle, compounding friends, compounding network, and that will pay for the rest of your life. So you're setting yourself up in your 20s and 30s for your 40s, 50s, and 60s. People don't kind of realize that. They think the world owes them a living in the 20s and 30s. The world doesn't own the living. You need to earn your place in it.
Before we start wrapping up this, because we have a plane to catch, how do you do it? There's a two-part question here, because I really admire the capacity you have to be a founder and a co-founder in different businesses, have a life, have a wife, have everything. And how do you, like, your time management, or how are you able to do so many things at the same time?
Because I break it down to the single common elements, all the same trade. Everything I do is the same trade.
Lifestyle?
No, what? The trade is capture the crypto opportunity or the technology opportunity. So it's all one bet.
Right.
All I'm doing is just doing few different ways of the bet. Yes, there's complexity with managing people and businesses and all of that stuff and not letting it take over your life, but it also is a period of time where this is it. This is the fucking big one. There's no time to do anything else. This is it. This is the most important moment pretty much of everybody's lives, and it's probably one of the most important moments in all of humanity because of what's happening with AI. And so, as people in crypto say, it's time to lock in.
Second part of that question, how your power of resilience is big, because I've seen the online, sometimes the negative comments when the markets are bearish and everything's red and people are nasty. How do you manage to don't let that affect you?
I do. Of course it affects me. It hurts me to the core. What you have to do is separate that group of negative emotions from the positivity that still exists and realize that it's not everything. Many people become overly sensitive because they see the negatives only and think that is the truth. But the truth is there's a whole bunch of people who like you for what you do. So somehow you just need to balance it by percentage weighting. Now, if the negative comments are growing faster and faster and faster, maybe you've got a problem. But if it's not growing excessive versus the overall opinion of Raoul Pal, whoever it is, you just need to separate yourself. You can't get sensitive when somebody criticizes you.
Develop a thick skin, pretty much.
I don't think you can develop thick skins. You just have to park it away in a box. But it does hurt, and it builds. And so you do get sensitive. So it doesn't go away. I mean, I'm still very scarred of 2022. But it's in a box, and it kind of goes away.
And in that part, so what is it that you do also to get out of it? So you love music, the lifestyle. This house is called rock and roll. So clearly...
Well, it's not called rock and roll. This is... But yes, it's...
Oh, I thought it was a house name.
No.
Oh, it's just the theme.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But I think that for you, that vehicle that encapsulates everything that you are at the core is music, right? So is that something you use to get out of the negative moments, or you isolate, or what do you do to...
Music, nature, travel, and learning.
Growing, yeah.
Yeah, just learning stuff, everything, anything. Broaden, deepen your knowledge base on everything is a joy. Music is like traveling. It's passion, it's emotion, it's memory. Music to me is a snapshot of memory. I remember where I was when I heard something, who I was with, everything else. It's like food, same. Wine, same. They're memories. So a smell memory of a wine, taste memory of a food, what meal people were having together. Right, these are just memory anchors.
Right.
So yes, they're pleasurable in their own right, but they also They become a collection of memories.
Power of nostalgia, yeah.
Yeah, and that's super good. So there's that, and travel does the same. Yeah, because you're taken out of your everyday life, getting up in the morning, having your coffee, reading your email, blah, 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 and suddenly you're in the jungle and the howler monkeys have stolen the bread from your table, and you're like, okay, I won't forget this. Not because it's extraordinary for the howler monkeys, they live that life every day, but it's extraordinary for you. So you've now got a new life experience of living with howler monkeys. The howler monkeys were like, well, I've robbed humans every morning, but it was amazing. It's like it happened to me in Zambia. It was really funny. We parked our expedition trucks, and the friend of mine who was kind of guiding us, he's like, just be careful of the baboons. They're a nightmare here because they got used to humans coming, and baboons are super smart, and they are thieves. They're just the worst. Ladrones. I mean, they're just the
Ladrones.
They're just the worst. And so we're all being careful, but the friend of mine, typical bloke with ADHD with his dad, leaves the door open. I turn around, I hear this screaming and shouting in this strong South African accent, swearing like, motherfucker. Turn around, and there is a giant baboon sitting in the driver's seat of the car, full silhouette like a human, throwing packets of biscuits and food, and ripping over with these guys trying to get the baboon out, but he's so scary because he's got massive teeth, and it's kind of just laughing. The baboon's like, I know how to do this. I've been doing this all the time. But I will never forget that memory of me going into baboon world and seeing the baboons beat the humans. So
do you recall the first memory when music hit you and you were like, oh, this is it? Was it Bowie, or were you a kid?
No,
what was it?
What was the first? My parents were not massively musical. They had background music. I think it was my sister probably buying or getting an ABBA single. And then I remember I bought a single. I remember the first album I bought was by The Beat, a British album, a British band. That was the first one I saved up. In fact, what I'd done is not eat my lunch at school and save the money, and that's what I used to do. I used to not eat lunch and buy records. And then I was really lucky. So music, it was just a very thing. And the music of the late 70s in England was the music of rebellion, because we'd gone through these awful economic times, and there was a lot of racism, and music came out to get rid of racism and anger and all of this. And so it was a really powerful time. This was the Clash and
the Pistols
and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But the Pistols weren't really, they were a bit more fuck the system. The Clash and stuff, there was a lot of this race stuff.
Right.
And these were multicultural bands who grounded on rock and reggae and just kind of overthrew a lot of the awful stuff that was going on. We get through the 70s and it ends up in Wham! Club Tropicana, and everything's now perfect. We drink cocktails and life moves on, which is the story of the 80s. So it really signifies social change more than it does now. Now we've kind of got most things down to pop. And yes, we did have pop, but even Wham! Club Tropicana meant something. It was the chance for my generation who grew up with violence, rioting in the streets, to go, it's all right. We can just go to Spain, drink cocktails, meet girls. And it was like being given permission not to be scared anymore. So music has a big place. I was also very lucky. I grew up in a street of 10 houses. One of the kids' uncles owns Reading Rock Festival, which is one of the oldest, largest rock festivals in the world, and certainly in England. So at the age of 11 years old, I had backstage passes.
Oh my God.
Meeting all the heavy metal bands of the age, because it was a very heavy metal period. So 11 years old.
Jesus. That's great exposure.
Yeah, so it's been in my blood ever since.
Holy. Okay, final one, Raoul. Real Vision. Raoul Pal itself. What's coming for you and Real Vision?
The story is just the same story. It just keeps getting bigger. As you bring more people into the system and more people are understanding, you can help more people at scale, which is what we do. We just have to figure out how to do it. It's not just media anymore. There's millions of podcasts. You don't know what's good and what's not. And I can see it. I can see the terrible information people are getting. I can see the videos of mine being cut up and taken out of context. It's
like you're shilling a token. It's like, nope, I didn't.
No, and it's like, so the power of the people, I've talked about this. This is a ground-up movement. The whole financial system is being built from the ground up. The power is to educate people, give them the tools, and they will make better decisions. Most people who are investing in crypto at a sensible level, not punting around meme coins, are making better decisions than most investment advisors. Who'd have thought that, right? We were told that you can't. Surely you needed to have a degree from Harvard to do that. And you needed to be trained and you need to be a CFA. None of it is true. We, as the people, can educate each other, make mistakes, learn, and do things together. So it's the power of the hive mind to unfuck our futures collectively is what I'm trying to get to. And that is the next leg of Real Vision, and that's the leg for me. And at some point, I'll get off that ride, but it ain't done yet.
Thanks so much, Raoul. This was incredible. I appreciate the time and the conversation. I feel like we could keep going, but we just need to leave. There's something I just wanted to leave you with. You just mentioned authenticity. And we've seen this over and over and over. You see now people, I am an old soul. I miss vinyl. My car has a cassette player. I'm an old soul in a way. So the more digital we're going to get, the more avatars and everything, I think my thesis is that people will crave more of the analog experience of this, of a face-to-face of the real person with the real authenticity showing who they are. And I think that's one of the components of why you excel at what you do. You, as you said, you're a great communicator. You can synthesize big
You know
ideas.
me, I'm the same person.
Yeah, you're not putting a show.
I don't change.
No.
Whether it's a work meeting or whether it's a...
Nope. But that's what will be the big thing, I think. Yes, attention, but blended with an authentic person.
That's all going.
You think?
With AI, it's all gone.
I think that people will crave the original person.
No, you won't even know.
We'll see.
You won't even know. It's like, oh, they're never going to listen to vinyl. Or they're never going to listen to it on CD. They're never going to stream. It's all bullshit. You get over it, and before you know it, everything else is just nostalgia.
But nostalgia is powerful.
Yeah, but it ain't the size of Spotify.
Oh, no, not to that mainstream level. But there will be a group of weirdos like me that will crave the authentic analog experience of...
Of course, and we talked
people.
about that. That was the authentic, the other side of the coin, which is you either lean into technology or lean away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but trust me, most people won't care.
Awesome, Raoul. Please, to everyone watching here to this camera, where can they find you and follow you?
Easiest way to find me is on X, or Twitter. So that's at Raoul, R-A-O-U-L, not the Spanish spelling. This is the French-Portuguese spelling, R-A-O-U-L-G-M-I. And really, I think if there's one thing I can do for you is there'll be a link below this, which is I put together a plan, and we didn't really talk about it today, but I think we've got about 6 years left before everything changes and the economic system gets warped by AI and robots and all of these things. And I think we've got a 6-year period that we can actually unfuck our futures in the ways that I've talked about here. And I've put a document together. It's free. It's part of Real Vision. But click on the link below. Go to that. Read it. Watch the video. You'll have a much better understanding of what you can do for yourself, how you can take control of yourself and navigate this journey. And really, most people probably watching this are a millennial because most people are in the world. And therefore, you're probably 35 years old. So basically what I'm saying is we can sort this out, that you're out the other side by the time you're 40. That's pretty decent. So give it a go.
Thank you so much. Not actually that you said the 6-year thing. Fuck, well. The thing is, I think this is important that will add value, but like in layman's terms. You have the GDP formula. So population, productivity, and debt. Those indicators are fucked, right? So productivity is down at this point.
Let me explain.
Yeah.
GDP growth, the growth of economies, the health of economies is the population growing? Because more people mean more GDP.
Right.
But they need to be productive. So they can't just be rice workers, or they can't be homeless, or they can't be whatever. They need to be productive workers.
Yeah.
So growing workers that are productive and growing debt, because we talked about how the debt system builds economic growth.
Yeah.
It robs it from the future. We've got the opposite. Population growth is falling, productivity because old people aren't productive, and debt growth broke in 2008, and we're just servicing debt. AI and robots change the entire equation. AI is infinite human knowledge and infinite human knowledge workers. Robots are infinite physical labor. Right? That's the end of the system. Our entire political system is based on capital and labor. All of the labor side, within 15, 20 years, gone. Completely. So we've got a complete change to the system coming. We don't know what it means. You can either fear it or invest in your own demise. But most of the big changes from AI and robotics don't happen immediately. But by 5 or 6 years, things are going to get weird. Going to get really weird. So all I'm saying to people is, you don't have long. I don't know what looks on the other side. I'm not a doomist. I think it's pretty optimistic and it's different ways of doing things. But in a wholesale societal shift, let's sort our shit out first so we can embrace it with security and comfort that we're going to be okay.
And the way that, population and productivity gets attacked by AI and robots, but the debt will be paid by the gains if you invest in this trend. So that's how you kill the debt component. How will that get fixed?
Debt only matters as a percentage of GDP. Mm-hmm. So let's say you earn $50,000 a year and you're in debt $200,000 a year. Okay, that matters. Well, if your earnings are $200,000 a year and you're in debt $50,000 a year, $200,000, less so. You earn $1 million. It's a matter of GDP growth. AI and robots increases GDP growth. Debt to GDP goes down.
Gotcha.
And so therefore it's not a big burden because the economy is growing fast enough to make all the economic activity. It really is pretty basic. But what we've got right now is an over-indebted person that is now working in Walmart, but they used to work in the Ford factory building cars. And they're up to their eyeballs in debt. That's where the world is. And what we're going to do is replace them by infinite people, infinite knowledge, lower cost. And it's not like we're going to rob those people of their future because they're going to retire. They want to retire. They just can't afford to. And then the debt will disappear, and that will unfuck a lot of people's future.
Amazing. I think that's the best spot to end this. Thanks so much for your time, Raoul. And go get that guide. It's amazing. I think it's very simple, and Real Vision will help you unfuck your futures, guys. So join. It's free. Talk soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Gracias por ver este podcast. Si es que te gustó, dale like y suscríbete al canal, así sabes cuando suban nuevos episodios. Aquí te dejo otro podcast que seguramente te va a gustar, y si quieres irte de largo, un playlist con todos los episodios de Acción Podcast. Que estés bien. Nos vemos la próxima. Chao, chao.